Sonic Unleashed might be the most overhated and overrated Sonic game, probably very next to Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic Adventure 2 as being lampooned by professional critics, absolutely ravaged, but widely loved by fans. It helped to popularize Sonic's modern gameplay loop by expanding its mechanics and promoting diverse other options by copying the gaming trends at the time. What is the history behind this recent upsurge in both discussions and debates surrounding a game mostly forgotten by Sonic Team and Sega alike? What made fans and gamers tend to have such a mixed opinion towards the game? And what made people so fervently remember such a title?
This is Sonic Unleashed. Hated, forgotten, forgiven. Before we talk about Unleashed, we have to address the change that bound it to be regarded as such a mixed-received game upon initial release.
Sonic the Hedgehog, or Sonic 2006, is still received as being universally panned by all professional critics alike, with a community that is split at both ends of the pendulum.
Diving even a pinky toe in this type of discussion will most likely result in you being covered in toxic fumes from the fandom that doesn't really want to expand on their arguments or ever acknowledge basic facts. I plead you to be careful in your discussions on this one. However, such a split in fandom only fostered a larger gap, which only increased with the arrival of Secret Wings on the Wii sporting a completely different playstyle.
With the last 3 console games receiving such heavy debate in the fandom and being absolutely lampooned by professional critics, something was meant to change. This was an era where Sonic was fading out of the cultural miasma, and another time where all platforming mascots nearly died. While Sonic on consoles had a lot of issues, the portable games fared much better.
Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Rush Adventure all came out with substantially greater scores than their console counterparts. So after Sonic Team came back together after their separate projects, and at the time, development of Unleashed taking a more adventure style, it slowly began to form closer to what DIMS had accomplished with the Rush games.
The choice was made to bring DIM's gameplay loop into the limelight while also working with them in an effort to create a Sonic game with unrivaled speed like never before, leading into what is perhaps the most controversial trailer in Sonic's history.
The initial reception of this trailer was met with
controversy, to say the least.
Well, I liked it.
Oh, you want to go to war? We'll go to war.
Something the marketing couldn't shake off right until the release date. Discussion pieces on forums and blogs were going off as a large portion of the fandom felt a sense of familiarity with disappointment of incorporating gameplay styles that didn't fit Sonic's core philosophy. With only a couple of months separating the teaser from release, trailers after trailers were met with both exhilarating hype and hasteful worries. November 18th, 2008 was a strange day for the Sonic community. Professional critics were not particularly kind to the Blue Blur, while the larger fandom had a more mixed to positive reception. But the one major constant of Sonic Unleashed, despite all of the negatives from reviews, was its art direction, its soundtrack, and speed. If you were to say only one element about Unleashed, it had to be about the power fantasy of Sonic and how this game interpreted that concept into gameplay.
It ended up striking a chord with a large portion of its audience.
The rest of the game was and still is debated as to how it successfully adapted the fantasy of its world, second gameplay half, and story. Most of it probably due to the lack of experience of the actual development crew. This was the first and only time Yoshihisa Hashimoto directed a video game, and the only second major screenplay from writer Kyoko Yoshimura, with her previous work being in Sonic 2006. That's rough. Although perhaps the criticism was misplaced, it was fair to critique Unleashed with its problems that weren't tied directly to the daytime stages. And so, most of the unfavorable reviews came in from that perspective at the time, lampooning both story direction, poor pacing, technical issues, and questionable additions of the Werehog as the primary reasons to avoid buying Unleashed.
I hope to think that they learned a lot from the release of Sonic Unleashed, as it got review bombed pretty hard, but the community still enjoyed it.
Fans didn't care as much and were hastily pushing Sega and Sonic Team into following the daytime stages gameplay loops for future installments. As long as the game didn't deviate into something wildly different, nearly everyone agreed. This was the way to go and proceed.
Sonic Team, of course just being Sonic Team, then went on to release Sonic and Black Knight in March of 2009. Granted, the project was probably already in development by the time Unleashed was released. Nonetheless, this stung quite a bit from a fan's point of view. Fortunately, we didn't have to wait very long until we did receive what we claimed for. For 2 years in a row, we were treated with truly great Sonic games. Colors on classic 2D speed platformer power-up type of action, and Generations on expensive 3D level design.
Both fulfill Unleashed ambition of the boost formula in different ways without necessarily replicating it.
If you're looking to enjoying different versions of similar gameplay loops, then the fans had the privilege to choose which they'd prefer. Generations in particular had really grasped a major part of the community, especially because of the potential of its modding scene, which we'll revisit later on.
Unleashed started in this time period to feel perhaps even more devoid of focus in comparison of these two recent entries that had avoided it entirely. Both Colors and Generations were composed of largely similar materials for the entire duration, which benefited the strong pacing Unleashed lacked.
It was just fast-paced action without barely any fluff in the middle.
Where both lacked, however, was where Unleashed succeeded. Speed and twitch reaction area levels were excelled and never really truly replicated post-Unleashed, save for maybe a few instances in Generations, which started a small but dedicated player base to reconsider and replay the strengths of Unleashed to experience those kinds of speeds all over again. Only 2 years later, on the 18th of October 2013, we were greeted with Sonic Lost World, a game that largely deviated from the winning boost formula, a change that ultimately stepped into an in-between spot for most Sonic fans without truly pleasing any major factions.
It was right about this time when the community's opinion on Sonic Unleashed started to shift.
But why? Well, what was only a couple of months prior, what is perhaps the largest mod ever developed for a Sonic game became available to the public. Project Unleashed was released on the 18th of March 2013. The mod took every major daytime stages of the original game and transferred it onto the modified Hedgehog engine of Generations. With a better supporting engine on the PC having most likely higher end capabilities, the Unleashed project was finally able to flourish the greatness of Unleashed level design and speed, while casting aside the annoying parts of the rest of the game, i.e. the control mapping, frame rate issues, the input queuing, and the community responded with a deafening roar of praise.
Shedding a light on only certain areas means that, some of the stuff gets dismissed, especially the criticized areas, and unfortunately, that's how nostalgia begins to form, only to reveal the huge fucking mess beneath.
As time moved on, the next major point of context is in 2017 during the release period of Sonic Forces. Forces landed once again flat with the fans. A game with no clear direction, mostly focused on retreading grounds with relatively uninteresting design decisions. Speed was not earned via twitch reflex decisions, nor was it given via expensive and diverse routing. Rather, it was given to you without real effort of mastering constant speed.
I'd like to think that if anything, modern, especially new Sonic games, have probably been more afraid to try something as outlandish as Werehog segments. But I think where they might have dismissed something in Sonic Forces, they made the mistake of making fast levels too fast, or you could beat a level in under a minute, where you play Sonic Unleashed at main stages that would take a whole long period of time, and they had the spectacle and the set pieces and whatnot.
Sonic Forces was a lot of things for a lot of fans, but where it perhaps felt the greatest only served to strengthen Unleash's strengths. The character work, the world building, the side stories, the detailing of the levels. This is where in Unleashed history is where we began to see a lot of returning interest for fans. YouTube reviews for all versions of the game, Reddit threads, Twitter arguments, comment about Unleashed during every Sonic livestream, demands after demands for a port or remaster for this near 10-year-old game on modern hardware. It didn't help either that nearly every other Sonic game either received a port on PC or was easily emulated, including its own Wii version. It seemed like Unleashed was the only game that was shafted by Sonic Team, with even backwards compatibility not offered to it, but to its younger brother generations. With limited ways of playing the game with new hardware, nostalgia began to kick in hard. Fans flat out dismissing what the game was criticized on release. Pacing, structure, medals, load time, technical issues plenty, which those became even more pronounced when Xbox revealed Unleashed could now be backwards compatible on Xbox One hardware on the 29th of November 2018, later extended on the 15th of November 2021, enhancing its performance to 60 FPS on Xbox Series X and S. Those emulations are definitive technical improvements over the original and are pretty much the main way fans are playing the game in 2022. If you're looking at gameplay footage online nowadays, you'll most likely see this enhanced version of the game. It's even the footage that you're seeing on screen right now. The reality, unfortunately, is far sadder. Unfortunately, this is where the highs of nostalgia don't hold up to the online praises for starting with a fresh pair of eyes. Overrated became quite a common phrase when discussing the game because there weren't any real way to play it under modern hardware. And now that we do, is it worth it? A system that costs $600 plus an old physical copy of a near 14-year-old game is the only way to replay the game legally on modern hardware.
Stress and worries that Sega might screw up a remaster even if they attempt it. Lord knows after what happened to Colors Ultimate, they might not even try. Maybe that's a good thing.
This is where some fans currently rest their opinions. Uncertain about a remake or remaster due to Sega's publishing, but still keeping an interest for PC port, or simply having a way to play the game on additional modern hardware without the current limitations. So, this is where Sonic Unleashed sits at right now. An emulated physical copy on only one major console, 2 possible PC emulation that are frankly quite fragile, no commercially available ports on PC, and 1 mod on an 11-year-old game to rule them all.
From carrying the weight of disaster into blinded nostalgia into undeserved backlash, Sonic Unleashed is not the unmitigated disaster critics believed it to be back in 2008, nor is it a pristine masterpiece like fans believed it to be back in 2017. Nor is it a game that claimed tuning praisers like it is believed nowadays.
It's a game with its own unique charms and strengths never replicated post its launch. That is, until maybe now. With Frontiers releasing in just a couple of days, Unleashed was once again part of the discussion as to how Frontier is going to stack up in certain departments. The world building, the characters, the story, the tone used, the side stories, the adventures. The success of Frontiers might dictate how Unleashed will be perceived in the future, because the original game was approached in such an interesting way, in a divisive time frame. A high budget effort into launching Sonic into a new era where he frankly should have died. Isn't that one hell of a coincidence? Sonic Unleashed is kind of a miracle that it even existed. And although we shouldn't be blinded to hate it or unconditionally love it, we should, at the bare minimum, appreciate its history.
Bye.